Hello, my name is Zisl Slepovitch, and I'm going to talk about the art of the badkhens. Badkhen, or marshalik, is the Jewish wedding jester, an improvising poet, sometimes defined as Jewish comedian with scholarly overtones. The profession was shaped in the Ashkenazic Jewish tradition. The term badkhen emerged in the Yiddish language from its Lashon Kodesh or Hebrew vocabulary, the plural form being badkhonim. Badkhen has had his counterparts, jesters, improvising poets, moderators, supervisors, entertainers, in numerous cultural traditions all over the world over the entire history of humankind. Master of ceremonies, the MC in the Western culture, the ancient Greek symposiarch, the Scandinavian and Anglo-Saxon thiel, the Georgian tamada. The list goes on and on. With all the obvious similarities, there are features that make the Ashkenazic Jewish badkhen unique. Originally, the function of badkhonim was linked to fulfillment of the commandment to delight the bride and groom and dance with them on their wedding day. However, being creative artists, they went above and beyond their primary function, exploring creativity in depth. In the early phase of Ashkenazic Jewish culture in Germany and Austria, as Western Yiddish was generally intelligible to the Germans, the Jewish naronim, or fools, or beer fiddlers, were loved and adored by Jewish and Gentile audiences alike. The Eastern European badkhonim used a lot of their Western European colleagues' patterns and took them further, developing even more sophisticated forms. Many badkhonim were full-time entertainers at the Hasidic courts, when those were established in the 18th century, first in Podolia, Ukraine, and then elsewhere in Eastern and Central Europe. But even in the pre-Hasidic period, badkhonim could be hired by the large Jewish communities as in-house entertainers for the weddings. The badkhen could function as a genealogist, narrating legends about the Rebbe and his ancestors. The legendary Hershele Ostropolier was Borech ben Yechiel of Meshbizh's Hoifnar, or court fool, while Yossel Broder ended his career playing a similar role in the court of Yisroel of Ruzhin. To a great extent, the badkhonim predated and overlapped with the improvisational actor's profession. Hence the other name for badkhonim, leitzim or leitzonim, fools, jesters, clowns, buffoons or merrymakers, joymakers, Freudbeschaffers, Lustigmachers, Katovetreibers, und freiliche Jiden in Yiddish. The word letz is derived from the Hebrew and means to scoff or to scorn. In Talmud, it is used to describe those who denied the authority of rabbis, so heretics. Not surprisingly, musicians at badkhonim often happen to be found in this group. Therefore, the term and its secondary meaning was applied to them as well. During the 16th through the 19th centuries, the term letz can be found in rabbinic literature and early Yiddish prints. It is evident that it was used interchangeably and was applied to both professions, the badkhonim and the klezmorim, instrumentalists, especially given that a lot of them combined both skills. Both in Germany and in Eastern Europe, the word badkhen was used along with the word marshalik. Both words signify their function as masters of ceremonies who would lead the guests through the complex structure of the wedding, explaining each custom and tradition with rhymes, rich in Talmudic quotations, especially those preaching morality. Obviously, such tasks required badkhens to be deeply literate and well-versed in the rabbinic literature. However, quoting scriptures did usually go side by side with individualistic poetry and humor. The latter could cause sharp criticism of the rabbis, who would perceive that as frivolous behavior. The very profession of badkhen was developing simultaneously and in close connection with the klezmers or klezmorim, Jewish professional or wedding musicians. Over the past few centuries, these two occupational groups formed a tandem that appeared to be rather unique to the Ashkenazic Jewish cultural tradition. Together they performed at weddings and worked out specific ways of collaboration, repertoire, and roles they performed there from late Middle Ages through the early 20th century. Badkhonim and klezmorim shaped Ashkenazi Jewish wedding as it entered the modern era. In many cases, badkhonim, just like the klezmorim, existed on society's margins, which correlated with their living on the borderland and absorbing material from many different traditions. The farther from the Orthodox center was the profession and the lifestyle, the less sanctioned was the profession itself. The same applied to the klezmorim. There is a Yiddish saying, "Tochterke, siz nicht a chosen, siz a klezmer." My daughter, this is not a groom, it's a musician. It might look rather surprising because people really loved the art of rhyme making and music making as well. Many badkhonim and klezmorim had double occupations that would warrant them social prestige and approval. A macaronic song that we recorded together with Dr. Nina Stepanskaya in Minsk, Belarus, from Mikhail Ackerman was about Mendel the barber, who led his family wedding band consisting of himself and his 3 daughters.
Есть еврейское местечко возле Штот-Бобруйск, много музыкантов Фундерштеттел и Гаройс. Скажет вам любой еврей, что капеллою своей славится Мендел парикмахер. Скажет вам любой еврей, что капеллою своей славится Мендел парикмахер. Всех развеселить умеет Мендель спевак, без него нельзя жениться, не сплясать никак. Заиграет, запоет, в пляс пускается народ, едем ахаса на сегодня. Заиграет, запоет, в пляс пускается народ, едем ахаса на сегодня.
The badkhonim occasionally used pseudonyms, such as Shimon Nar, or fool, in the 16th century, Mordke Unglück, misfortune, Oizer Marshalik, Sander Badkhen, or Mordke Chabad in the 19th century. One of the early known badkhonim was Velvel Zbarger, born in 1824, who was a badkhen, poet, and songwriter. Zbarger's creativity inspired the notable 20th century Yiddish poets, songwriters Mark Warshawski, Mordche Gebirtig, and Shmerke Kaczerginski. Another outstanding and multi-talented badkhen, Eliakim Zunzer, born in 1836, published his badkhones and musical compositions. Not infrequently, badkhonim used the synagogue chant as the structural and stylistic base for their compositions. That shouldn't come as a surprise, given tight integrity of the Ashkenazic Jewish musical tradition in general. Just like many chazonim, synagogue cantors, badkhonim would take their recitatives further and compose songs in advanced rhythmical and vocal technique. Traditionally, the badkhen announced the wedding presents, droshe geschenk, given after the groom concluded his Talmudic discourse, as well as the principal moments of the wedding, such as Kabbalas Ponim, welcoming the guests, and groom's meal, chosen mol. The principal part of the badkhen's performance was addressing the bride and groom. Badkhens considered it a success when they could bring the bride to tears. That wasn't too hard, especially with the orphan brides who were marrying at a very young age. In the 1930s, Yiddish film Gott, Mensch und Teufel, God, Man and the Devil, the Yiddish Faust, there is a scene where the father-in-law, who obviously had played the role of the badkhen at his son's wedding, repeats the act at his daughter-in-law's request, and she experiences a flashback and goes into tears.
I weine, calling you wein, es wird schon nicht sein, was es ist gewesen. Der freie Täsen schein weg, die schwimmst, die zieht sie a fremden Breck. Heute wirst mir nicht lachen und nicht singen, Trunkenheiten wirst du sein gezwungen. Sie da schöne Jugend nimmt schon an Ende, anstatt hatte Mama, wirst du leben zwischen Fremden.
When the modern klezmer musicians and researchers of the tradition Joshua Horowitz and Merlin Shepard met Meyer Bogdanski, one of the last surviving pre-war Polish Jewish badkhens in London, they used the opportunity to record and beautifully present his art on the Budowitz Band's album, A Wedding Without a Bride, released in 2000. This record gives an insight into the parts of Ashkenazic Jewish wedding that today are mostly obscure. Abspielen die Kalle, and Abspielen dem Chossen, playing for the bride and groom's processionals. Kalle und Chossen Basingens, separate chants for bride and groom.
Oh, mein teure Kalle, mein teuer Kind, was soll ich dir sagen, gurat sind, als dein Gewein soll auch et heint vor dem besten Schnamale gein. Euch sollst du beten dem Beurer Joilo, mit a bissel Trägen mein, als du sollst nicht bleiben, kein Jingalmune und Kinder, kleine Jesäumim Kinder. Euch sollst du beten dem Beurer Joilo, mit a bissel Trägen mein, als du sollst Cholile nicht darf, mit Kaveshem Punem, zu deiner Tate Mama zurückzugehen. Und gib sich noch ein Gucker an alle 4 Seiten, wirst du doch sehen, wie die Teirige stehen und beten vor dir von der Weiten. Und gib sich noch ein Gucker an alle 4 Ecken, wirst du doch sehen, wie man geht hier schon durchs teure Käpperle badecken. Oh, mein teure Kalle, mein teuer Kind, wenn ich soll dir werden sagen, reit, wollte ich dir kein Zug noch mein. Nur du sollst schon mit deinem richtigen Weg zu der Krippe gehen.
Jack M., a native of the Polish town of Szydłowiec, was recorded for Fortunoff Video Archive for Holocaust Testimonies at Yale University in the early 90s. He turned out to be a wonderful folk singer with impressive memory.
The biggest kick-off in a wedding was the Marshalik. A Marshalik was out of this world. He was the entertainer. He was the announcer of the Rusche Geschenk. They didn't give no money, just presents, verstehe? And he got to entertain them in dates. We had 2. One was a religious guy, and the other one was handweltig. The religious guy, he made it in Hasidic. He gave them a Hasidic song, and kavitzen up and no jokes at all. Net gekannt dem singen, sie schmelke, sucht der Tate, sei nicht ja so tame Watte. Auch aus dein Vater Jakob dem Alten, in die dein Kass auf mir einhalten. Kann nicht essen, kann nicht schlafen, weil steht, geschrieben in der Teure, also sucht in der Beure, a Idol tut nicht sein allein. A Weib muss man huben, sollen kennen wie später begruben. A Idol tut nicht sein allein.
In the modern era secondary diaspora, primarily that in the United States and Canada, the profession of badkhen was revived almost exclusively in the Hasidic communities, most of which were established by the rabbis, the Holocaust survivors, after World War II. The badkhonim play an important role at Sheva Brachas, at 7 blessings ceremonial dinner, that often significantly exceeds the actual chuppah, or wedding, by the number of guests and scale of entertainment. In the klezmer and Yiddish secular revival that started in the United States and Canada around 1970s, there have been several prominent figures who could do and did badkhones as well, most notably Michael Alpert. As the Jewish cultural revival hit the former Soviet Union, another noteworthy badkhen and Yiddish singer, Yefim Chorny, gained the well-deserved international acclaim. The further change in the new Yiddish culture that is informed by the wide stylistic context of the world music and pop music industry highlighted the obvious similarity of the badkhen and the rap or DJ MC. Hip Hop Chasene, that came out in 2003, became a groundbreaking record, marrying the fiddle and the microphone, in the words of its creators, or in other words, old-world klezmer music and hip-hop and rap. It has an MC, badkhen Michael Alpert, as well as so-called the stage name of the Canadian Montreal artist Josh Dalgin, who was also rapping in Yiddish, or rather Yinglish, and was the co-producer of that record together with the British violinist Sophie Solomon.
Fahren Klezmur in gewaltige Ein bei uns dabei. So hat Hassan von Hip-Hop und Klezmerei. Rap da, bisschen Kroch, aber soll leben gesund sein. Beim Klarnettel, Rap Welven Brettel. Mit den digitales Allstars und mir Pullen als bis das Stelje. Mit der politische Kiskis bin ich echt waran. An ja kurz nach Badkhen Rap Slim Rebellie.
To end this brief review of one of the most colorful and interesting Jewish traditional occupations, I would like to turn to the children's parody of Badkhens Drosche, recorded by Lehman and cited by David Roskis in his article Major Trans in Yiddish Parody. Kalle shekale veje, der Chossen werde schicken auf Leffele chrein, wirst du sich basmarken bis die Zehn, die Teuben stehen auf die Lodden, sie schon Zeit zu geben, a Stück Leffel Loden, die Teuben stehen auf die Betten, sie schon Zeit, die Kalle zu bedecken, oi die Teuben stehen auf die Tischen, sie schon Zeit, die Kalle soll sich bapischen.